The Creek. On Halloween night, as I prepared to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I laughed at my own paranoia, attributing it to the spooky holiday atmosphere. But as the evening wore on, and the moon cast eerie shadows across my porch, I heard a soft scratching sound coming from my attic above. My heart raced as I climbed the creaky stairs to investigate. In the dim light, I saw it, a raccoon, trapped and frightened. Its beady eyes locked onto mine, and its panicked movements sent shivers down my spine. Fearfully, I retreated, calling animal control to handle the situation. As they removed the raccoon, they mentioned it had been up there for a while, possibly watching me from the shadows. As I returned to my candy-giving duties, I couldn't help but wonder how long it had been observing me, and what else might be lurking in the darkness of my own home. I went to sleep that night after easing my mind. When I went into bed, I heard the scratching again. Screaming Bloody Mary. Halloween was always my favorite time of the year. I loved the thrill of dressing up in a spooky costume and wandering the dimly lit streets. Getting to collect candy from neighbors who transformed their homes into haunted mansions for the night. It was the best. This year, I was determined to explore a different part of the neighborhood, one that had always intrigued me but remained largely uncharted territory in my Halloween adventures. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, I donned my werewolf costume and grabbed my trusty candy bag. My heart raced with anticipation as I set out alone, my parents trusting me, of course, to be responsible on this eerie night. I made my way down unfamiliar streets, each house adorned with jack-o'-lanterns and fake cobwebs. The air was filled with the faint scent of burning leaves, and the distant sounds of children's laughter and excited chatter only added to the festive atmosphere. But as I ventured deeper into the neighborhood, I noticed something unusual. The houses here seemed older, more decrepit, as though they hadn't seen a Halloween visitor in years. The yards were overgrown, and the windows were boarded up. It was as if this part of town had been forgotten by time itself. Feeling a growing unease, I pressed on. The street's lamps flickered ominously, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the cracked pavement. The wind whispered through the trees, and the distant sound of my own footsteps seemed to echo way too loudly. I was about to turn back when I heard it, a blood-curdling scream that shattered the silence of the night. My heart leaped into my throat as I froze in place. It wasn't the typical playful shriek of someone enjoying Halloween. It was desperate, an agonized cry of a woman in distress. My instinct was to run in the opposite direction, but something compelled me to follow that chilling sound. I couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed help. Clutching my candy bag, I moved cautiously towards the source of the scream. As I turned a corner onto a narrow, dimly lit alley, the scream came again, closer this time. Panic welled up inside me, but my curiosity and concern pushed me forward. I followed the winding alley until I reached an old, dilapidated house with a crooked, rusted gate. The scream seemed to be coming from inside the house, and my heart was pounding in my chest. Now before, I said I was worried about this woman screaming, and I definitely was. But once I approached that house, my courage went out the window. My mom's voice echoed in my head, and immediately I turned around and ran off. Now I ask myself every night, what happened to that woman, and was she screaming for help? And was I one of the last people who could have helped her? Of course, I'll never know. And to be quite honest, it's probably better off that way. Spooky stories. Halloween was always a time for friends to come together, and this year, of course, was no different. I decided to attend a Halloween party thrown by some of my acquaintances, eager for a night of laughter and costumes. Little did I know that the evening would take a chilling turn. As I approached the house, I marveled at the elaborate decorations. The host, Mark, had gone all out to create a spooky atmosphere. Fake spiderwebs clung to the porch railings, and jack-o'-lanterns flickered with eerie orange light. The dim glow from a few strategically placed candles lit up the fancy home. The party was in full swing when I entered. People were scattered throughout the dimly lit rooms, chatting and laughing. I felt a sense of excitement in the air, amplified by the anticipation of a night filled with thrills and fun. As the evening wore on, I met new people and reconnected with some old friends. The conversations were lively, and I soon lost track of time. Eventually, though, I found myself needing some fresh air and decided to step outside onto the back porch. The backyard was shrouded in darkness, and the rustling of leaves and the cool breeze created an eerie ambiance. The moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, leaving the night in complete darkness. I shivered involuntarily and pulled my costume's faux fur coat tighter around me. Feeling a bit uneasy, but attributing it to the Halloween atmosphere, I leaned against the porch railing and stared out into the yard. That's when I noticed something unusual. In the distance, beyond the yard, I saw a faint, flickering light. It seemed like a lantern or a candle moving slowly through the trees. I watched, intrigued yet wary, as the light drew closer. It was then that I noticed the figure holding it. A tall, well-dressed man, but in tattered clothing. He walked with a limp through the woods, while his lantern casted shadows on his hollowed face. He looked as though he'd stepped out of a centuries-old ghost story. My heart began to race as he drew nearer. I wanted to turn and go back inside, but something about his presence held me in place. He didn't seem to notice me as he walked past the yard, his eyes locked on the distance. As he disappeared into the darkness, a feeling of dread washed over me. I knew I needed to get back inside, but my legs felt heavy, as if they were glued to the spot, watching him. The wind whispered through the trees, and the night seemed to close in around me. Suddenly, a hand touched my shoulder, causing me to jump in fright. It was Mark, the party host, who had come outside to check on me. He noticed my pale face and asked if I was okay. I told him my response, trying to explain what I'd just witnessed, but Mark dismissed it with a nervous laugh. "It's probably just a neighbor trying to spook us," he said, ushering me back inside. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off that night. The party continued, but I couldn't help but wonder about that mysterious man with the lantern. Was he a neighbor, as Mark suggested, or something else entirely? The way he moved seemed chilling, and his destination to which he looked at seemed otherworldly, as if he wouldn't let anybody stop him from where he was going. I'm not the biggest believer in ghost stories, but I know what I saw, and that wasn't natural. Perhaps it was a neighbor. It was Halloween after all, but the chilling encounter lingered in my mind, casting a shadow over what should have been a normal Halloween night.